but it works now because I tested it. So I'm very happy about that. So there's this little
That's
recording bot, Craig.
that's very useful.
Yeah, they should make this first party integration into Discord, just recording these voice chats. Or if you pay for it or something, it makes sense for them to charge.
Yeah, how does Discord even make money? Seems like they
I
host
think they
an
make a lot of
awful
money.
lot. Yeah, well, like how?
Yeah, they have all these like power-ups and
All right.
nitros, server boosters, which we have some of those as well. Thank you so much for boosting our server. Yeah, and I think they have a pretty good business model.
I guess good for them. I miss IRC, honestly. IRC was so great 20 years ago. That's how I got into programming, like just hanging out on IRC channels. Well, I mean, how I got into open source. I felt like early internet vibes, though. Because, yeah, I'm 41, so I miss the early internet.
Oh yeah.
When,
Well,
like, there was 3 websites on it. Like, when I
yeah,
first started using the internet, there wasn't really search engines. Like, the idea of it wasn't fully cemented. So you had to know where you were going, and you couldn't really find things otherwise. So you'd buy, like, magazines because they'd have websites in. They tell you where to go.
yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah, and you would just type those addresses into your browser,
Did you
not click
you
anywhere.
had that as well? Oh, cool.
Say it again?
Did you experience the magazine tells you where to go part of the internet as well, or
Yes,
you're
but
not sure
mostly it
how
was
old you are?
the magazines already had like CDs where you could install some stuff with.
Oh man, CDs, yeah. Yeah, that was you'd buy it and like sometimes they come with 2 CDs. You're like, ooh, like I'd go through all the directories looking for what software they would bundle, and I'd install everything. I must have got so many viruses. I must have.
Nice.
Just looking for neat little utilities or fun things. Yeah, like it seemed like so much, 500 megabytes.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I mean, some websites are bigger than, some of those programs back in the day.
Yeah, well, I mean, Rust wouldn't fit on a CD. Well, actually, the
Cool.
compressed size.
So yeah, nice. Thanks so much for joining, everyone. We have a chat here on the side in the top right corner, but there's also this tea time text if you prefer that, like as a separate channel, which is a bit more, which is not ephemeral, I guess, because this chat here goes away once we close this AMA, as far as I know. So we can use the tea time text channel as well. Great. So for this AMA, I'm joined by Max and Jacob from our team, and I was thinking about kind of like what we could discuss, and we had a great session last week, kind of like with the entire community, everyone chiming in, like asking questions, and it was really cool. And one of the things that we didn't get to touch on so much last week, but was released early last week, was BrewKit. So just a better way to package for tea. And yeah, I would love to kind of like start our discussion off with BrewKit and kind of like what led to that. And there were another questions before that we had, like initially like tea commands, and we started kind of like focusing only on packages, and BrewKit itself is a package in tea. So I don't know, Max, when you started hacking on BrewKit, what did you want to solve, and yeah, how do you think it turned out?
Yeah, so when I released Homebrew back in 2009, I'm pretty sure it came out of the box or very quickly after I released it with a few sub commands: edit, create, build. No, build it because install did the build with Brew because it was an era before cloud storage was cheap. So started off homebrew by everything had to be compiled from source. And this wasn't like atypical, right? Like MacPorts did it the same. So that was the main competition at the time, was MacPorts get compiled from source. Homebrew's main differentiator there was it compiled a lot less from source. It relied on what came with the Mac, while MacPorts didn't have the guts to do that. And I fully understand why they didn't have the guts to do that when you're doing the entire open source ecosystem. It's nice to have control over all of it. It means you're probably going to have less bugs, but in reality, actually, it was the opposite. As you can imagine, like the more complexity you have in software, the more can go wrong. Anyway, so it came out of the box with Brew Create, Brew Edit, then Brew Install would automatically build your packages that you'd written. So Brew Create would create a package on your system. And you give it a URL and it would figure out how to extract the URL. It'd have a look inside the tarball for what it found and then figure out the commands it thought you should run, add a few comments, and then you could open it in the editor with Brew Edit. And after you've done that, you could submit a pull request. And this is, instrumental in why Homebrew got so much contribution so quickly. There wasn't many developer tools that had ever been released, really, that appealed to people who didn't really know how to contribute to open source. It was always the thing that I thought was one of the worst things about the way open source typically was done, is that it was always so kind of elitist, really, in how it was difficult to get involved. It was really difficult to figure out how you, as someone that just enjoyed the program but saw an opportunity to improve it, could participate in that. Like with all my open source, I've always tried to make it as easy as possible for people to get involved, because that really is one of the major things about open source. But also, like, I think T is a great example. Like, some of our best features have come from the community. So, we don't have all the ideas, but what we do have is a nice base. We have a nice base set of ideas and a good understanding about how to get other people's ideas into the platform, the product. So with T, we launched probably a little earlier than we should have. As a funded company, sometimes you have to make those calls. And the infrastructure for submitting packages as a user, an end user, someone who just wants to add a package to T, was not the best. It was adequate. It was very much geared towards CI/CD, but it used T scripting. That was neat. So we were showing off how T could just fetch the scripting languages and any dependencies they have just by running the script. So I knew that at some point I would be improving that. I didn't think it would take quite as long as it did, but it was good enough for a while, and there was lots of other things that needed to be built and maintained and fixed. But suddenly had the time, like a week and a half ago or so, and the inspiration. Like, part of it was I wasn't sure how we were going to do it. I've thrown around the T command idea a few times on these things, where we have a repo that's /command cmd, and probably maybe we'll still do something there. But the idea was that people would fork that, and then the forks would be brought into tcli automatically if the user typed in the word related to that fork. So, like, one of the reasons I wanted to get that done sooner was because I thought we needed an install command. But as we've said on these things before, we figured out that the T magic could do installing for you. And so I've always tried to do things that way, where I don't fully develop the idea or take the shortcut until I've really exhausted everything I can think of. So I wasn't sure really how an equivalent of Brew Create, Brew Edit would work with T, but we've certainly come to the sort of perspective that T is a tool for using everything else in the open source ecosystem. So it made sense to build the edit, the create commands, things like that, as a separate package. So I just tried it out, and it's great. It's really neat being able to just so easily, because of T, use everything you want and know it's going to be there. So BrewKit uses at least 5 different things, different other packages. So I just use whatever makes sense for the different tasks. And we use the developer environment system, and that's really nice. So when you step into your Pantry checkout, It just sets it up so that when you type in pkg, the brewkit command, it just works in that directory. So it's much more directory centric. Like a lot of the time, it's difficult to figure out how to contribute to open source because you have like two copies of it. You have the installed copy, and then you have the copy you've checked out that you're working on. I think this honestly hinders a lot of open source contribution for things like Node and Gem and Python because it's difficult to figure out how you can actually test your fixes. So with Brew, that was part of the neatness of it, is that you cloned Homebrew and it was both the installation and the place you could work on it. And then it was all Git, so you just did a pull request straight in your checkout. Now, obviously nowadays there's an installer for it. It's a little less like that, but it's still essentially a Git repository with a bunch of Ruby scripts, and you can edit in place. Now, T, I started off with the pantries being separate straight away, so it wasn't quite a checkout, but it there's some detriment to that certainly. Like Tcli is a little harder to use if it's installed for your fixes, but really the pantries are where it's at. So you clone the pantry, and then when you're in there, because the developer environment is set up, it operates inside that directory. So it while you're using T inside that directory, all the packages you're writing or editing are available. So it's more how developers actually work this time around, which I think is better. I'm quite pleased with it. It's got some bugs that I'm trying to work out for sure. And we automatically figure out what you're working on, which is a nice touch as well. We use Git, we ask Git what is new since this branch has diverged with the main branch. So you can just type pkg edit and it opens everything that you are working on automatically for you. And this time around, I made it pkg init rather than create because init became a verb that is so commonly used in open source now. But at the time, it wasn't that common. Like Git was the only thing I knew that did it. So it's pkg init, and if you don't provide a package URL, and I kind of expect people not to because it's not what you're thinking of up front. It just creates a random. There's like 20 to 30 blends of tea that I got ChatGPT to provide for me, and it just picks a random one, and so it calls your package after a random blend of tea, and then it opens a template which you can edit, and then you can do pkg build to see if it will build. And so I plan to add an awful lot of things here, and it's nice because it is a separate package that we can add things there, and it doesn't bloat up Tcli like at all. So we can add a lot more build infrastructure without worrying about making the base tool too complicated. And I think this happens a lot. What was I using the other day testing something out? I can't remember, but like I just typed in the command. I often do this with T things. It's just so nice. Like a package is released, so rather than look at the package, I just type in the command that it provides, gets downloaded, and shows me the help text. But it, I had 2 pages of commands, and that, so like I don't know where to start. And like, I know that you go to the website and you read the docs, but a lot of people just type the command in. Like if you type the command in for T, well, it won't give you the help because by default it tries to provide an environment for wherever you are. But if you do --help, you'll see that it's very short. And that's deliberate. I tried very hard to drill down what it showed you to what I felt was the most concise but not too concise amount of information, so that people who do that see that, oh, this is what it's for, this is how I use it, and like it isn't too complicated. Like that feeling of intimidation that people get so regularly when they try out new tools just puts them off trying out the new tool. I was talking to someone yesterday who called it tool fatigue. That's totally it, especially nowadays. Like so many new developer tools released continuously. And most people don't want to try anything new out until they know it's going to be a success. So in order to get to that position of success, you really have to, concentrate on all the details. So yeah, this is one of them. Sorry, I got off topic, so I'll pass back to you.
No, it's all good. It's I love that you can just hold a monologue. It's a gift, really.
Only on this
One of the
topic,
things.
can't talk about anything else. I just asked my fiance.
No, what I really like is that it's a separate package. Is that we can build or we can add like build instructions and test instructions for different forms as we like, for example, write the like -l, like pkg-l build to test it on Linux via a Docker container, of course, on my Mac environment. But it's super helpful because I don't need to wait for the, GitHub CI to kind of like give me that error, and I can like debug it and like step into the directory, the Linux directory where everything's being installed to. And I felt that really helpful on the last couple of packages that I was trying to debug, specifically on Linux. So yeah, I can see that building that out.
Well, before we had like a bunch of aliases that we passed around internally, which allowed you to test things in Docker, and it wasn't great. Although we are allowing packages to be merged now if they only build on Mac, because what's more important to us right now is to increase the number of packages. When we got 10,000, we might be more strict. Like Homebrew is super strict nowadays. Like we tried to get C into Homebrew, which was a fun experience. Like I haven't contributed a package in a while. I think the last time was 2017. I wrote this thing which, if you look at it now, you can see how T came about, called Swift Shut. It was a scripting tool for Swift, because I was big into Swift for a while. And yeah, I mean, that wasn't so bad getting that in. But now, like, what was their suggestion? That well, it was back and forth for ages. They have a lot of linting, and I know Mike McQuaid was big into that sort of stuff. Like when I worked with him on Homebrew, because he was one of the first people that turned up, he was always into the linting and getting the robots to tell everyone what to do. I'm more of a I want people to be happy being a part of my project. I don't think that's his priority.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, wasn't it that it required touching 2 or more files, and their default rules involve requiring that only a single file be touched to add a package?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
The pull request is available. Someone can go check. But in the end, we just closed it, and we made our own tap. And it would have been nice to be in Homebrew proper. I was almost expecting them to deny the pull request, because I don't know, they don't like me very much anymore. I don't think I ever did anything to deserve it, but that's certainly how they feel about it. But they weren't problematic. Like most of the people who work on it now, apart from Mike, I didn't really work with them before I quit, like 2016 or so.
I mean, it has also been a while already, 6 years. That's
it's testament
an
to the project.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Like a lot of people have turned up over the years to keep it running, keep it going with very minimal funding. Like I hope that T's protocol could fund Brew. Like I'm sure it's going to continue to exist for a long time. Although we do think things like Brew and T will actually have a little trouble getting funded with our protocol. We've been talking about it lately, because they're not a dependency of anything strictly, Although we're going to make npm a dependency of all node packages, we can't really make T or Brew or a dependency of all system type packages, because there's so many of them. Now, admittedly, nowadays you have Bun, and Strictly Dino will take npm packages as well. So I don't know. Actually, we were going to make Node a dependency of all npm packages. That's right, not npm. So in fact, npm would still, it wouldn't be a dependency of anything. It would need direct staking. Anyway, we're talking about BrewKit. So what does Jacob think of BrewKit?
Yeah, I mean, BrewKit's just it's the sort of semi-final form of all the stuff we've been working on in terms of build infrastructure for 8 months now, maybe closer to 9 months. Yeah, it's been through a lot of iterations. I think the earliest build script iterated through every single version of a package it could find and tried to build them all, and stopped when they started failing because you'd get too far back in time. So that was a good time. Rust could take, a couple of days if you were on Linux x86 84, because we were trying to build up the build up the pantry and make sure we had everything. But yeah, the brew kit is, it's taking all the stuff we learned out of, half a year and more of building the software and trying to make it rote and super reproducible and just really really simple for anybody to pick it up and be like, hey, I want to package this thing. How do I do it? I see all these package YAMLs. Okay, great. It's 4 commands, and when I've got it working, it's working, and it's going to work anywhere. So yeah, it's a nice encapsulation of the stuff that we've built up organically, which honestly is generally what release software is, unless you've overplanned it and refuse to learn from anything you've done along the way.
Nice. One of the things with packaging that I'm still sometimes kind of like messing up, and that only comes out when I run a test of that particular package, is kind of the differentiation between runtime and build time dependencies. Yeah, and then only in test, and if I test it locally, then if it's something like OpenSSL or so, I have a system version of OpenSSL, so it will just take that in the test, right? And I won't know locally. It will only come out in the CI on GitHub that it's missing something.
Yeah,
and that's
there's
sometimes annoying.
There's a couple of ways to check for that. On Linux, you use LDD, which is really just calling object dump to look at what's linked in terms of libraries. And on Mac, it's OTool, which again is spitting out the same output as object dump. So it can be tough on the Mac because the Mac provides a lot of stuff at the system level. So it's not always the case that when you build locally, you can detect which things that you need to have linked in for dependency time. And unfortunately, you like a lot of the rest of us are working primarily on a Mac. But yeah, running LDD on the compiled binary can show you the linkages, which it just saves you one CI cycle, honestly, to move the dependency beforehand. But it's it's just one of those little build tricks that you pick up over time.
Nice. Yeah, it's good to know.
I should make it so the test command has its own prefix, and that would fix that, so you get it straight away. Well, yeah. So if okay, maybe not. It's a little tricky. Like in CI, we deliberately do the test in a separate instance so that it picks up and in a different directory as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it finds those sort of issues, but locally it can be a pain. Like it's a pain. Packaging's a pain, honestly. Like we do need a lot more packages, so we're hoping that we're just going to get to like that magical 1,000 number. I reckon 1,000 packages. We have almost everything that most people want, like at least the 80%. But we're probably going to have to automate it. That's the truth. Like this stuff's been done before, and doing it again, like, not that much fun. It isn't. I think me and Jake have been hugely frustrated, especially during the bootstrapping period that he was talking about earlier. When you're trying to build up the whole package graph, and you need like these base things first, and then whenever you realize that you've done something a little bit wrong, like RPath, for example, like they trip us up all the time. The RPath describes where to find like dynamic libraries. We had to rebuild everything like, I don't know, 10, 15 times.
Yeah.
So it was a regular thing. I just say, Jacob, please rebuild everything, and then 3 days later we could resume.
3 days would be if it all went smoothly. A lot of times it was a week.
Yeah, good. Packaging Haskell. Does that actually still work? Does Haskell still work?
As far as I know, don't touch it.
Yeah, I'm not going to touch that one. Yeah, so some things are easier than others, especially nowadays. The truth is, Indigo and Rust is pretty simple because tooling's advanced, and Cargo does a lot more than the old built. Like everything used to be auto tools. Like this GNU just made such terrible stuff.
Yeah, I mean, building Rust tools with Cargo has to be the best modern compilation experience for my money. It's one command. Cargo does literally everything, and I've yet to see a Cargo build take more than a couple tries to get right, and pretty much everything else, you stand a much higher chance of having to touch it a couple times. And my love of Rust not be construed as any way affecting my preference for cargo for building things.
That's certainly part of the problem with how Cargo does things is the amount of duplication that ends up happening. Like they tend to directly import like C libraries that they might need themselves. Like there's a lot of copies of OpenSSL in our packages because that's how these packages decided to do it. So that means if there's a security issue with OpenSSL, all of them need to update, and that's not really in our control currently. And let's face it, OpenSSL has a security problem like every other month. So yeah, it's what I'd like is to provide T primitives, so tools like CMake and Meson and Cargo can use T to get those dependencies, the correct versions that they need and want in a standard format so they can integrate it. So that's something I'd like to do longer term. Another thing I was thinking of recently was making the C compiler and all that other tooling into stubs that can invoke T. So if you try to link to OpenSSL using the C compiler, T intercepts it and installs OpenSSL and then sets up the environment so that the C compiler does it correctly. And so tools like Cargo and Gem and Pip, because these things do build native extensions like here and there. Like you can see it happening. If the T magic could apply for that, like seamlessly, and I've been milling that one around. Like I've got too many things on my Docker right now, so not sure when we do it. Like sometimes I do it when we need it. Like one package that we really want is just struggling, and the easiest solution for us would be to do that. So yeah, we'll see. We'll get to it.
But that actually might be a good segue to the kind of like request for comment that we decided to post like earlier this week regarding the packager install location. I'll just post it in the chat here. Kind of like the dependency manager, because he can install other dependency managers, and we've been thinking about that internally about, you know, where should that location go? Should we influence that location? T being a relocatable kind of like sandbox, or you could think of it as a sandbox, versus kind of like, I don't know, putting our opinion over the maintainers of that particular dependency manager. And we got a comment actually from David Roman. He's not on Discord, I think, or at least he's not here right now. But yeah, have you given us any much more thought, either Jacob or Max?
I mean,
and maybe you can reiterate for the people here who haven't read the RC.
Yeah, I mean the argument's a pretty straightforward one, right? It's, do you do what people expect the package manager to do, or you do what we've told people to expect of T, right? So in general, we've said everything in T is under .t or whatever prefix you set, but .t is the norm, the default. And if you remove .t, you've removed it. Like there's nothing left. You don't have to worry about anything. But that said, if you're installing a package manager with a package manager, you might expect your package manager, you know, your under package manager to behave the way you expect it to behave, right? So there's a potential conflict, not just between the possibilities, but between the use cases, right? The people who use T to sandbox their environments as a first order requirement are going to have one preference, and the people who think of T as a package manager for their system are going to have a secondary preference, where, you know, if I install Gem and then I use Gem to install Hex PDF, I'm going to expect that binary to be on my path somewhere. So, you know, there's basically, you know, there's going to be two sides. Well, there's at least two sides to the argument, and there will legitimately be people on both sides. So, you know, picking out how and what to resolve that is going to be a matter of you know, debate among not just the users, but the developers, and how do we make it configurable, and what do we choose for intelligent defaults. You know, our big thing at T is by default it should do the least surprising thing and should be the most usable and cause the fewest problems for people. So, what is that default, and how do we walk that line between competing priorities?
Yeah, it's very well said. For sure, my biggest priority is, as Jake said, that T should just work, and that was my priority with Brew as well. But part of the reason that Brew by default installed to user local /user /local, because at the time it was very common to install like things with Ruby gems, or I don't think Pip existed at that time. But they would use the default system tooling like the C compiler to build things, and user local was by default in the path. So it was one of the issues I had with Mac ports, is that it put things in a weird place, so nothing worked. Here we're taking this a different perspective where we're like, okay, use T to build an environment, and then within that environment everything works. And we're still like fleshing that out entirely, but it's a new way of approaching it to a certain extent. Like I do get the impression that Nix does that to some extent. I don't understand Nix that well, honestly. I find it very difficult. It's so opaque, but we'll talk about Nix another time, maybe next time. So yeah, I wanted it to just work. And so one of the things that I did recently was change where Ruby Gems installs its gems to the user's home directory .gem, because that's the normal place that gems go in the user's home directory when you do a user install. If you do a system install, they can go anywhere, but a user install it fits with the T idea, really. Is we install in your home directory, you're expecting you to operate with T as a user level. So we default to user installs as well. This is another, I'm trying to make it using gem like nicer and do what people expect. And so also installs the binaries for gems to .local/bin. And I chose that because user local bin requires sudo, and gem especially is one of those tools where it doesn't ask for sudo, when it's installing just the things it needs to in that place. You need to do the whole thing as sudo. You shouldn't run anything that just builds as sudo. So into .local/bin. And so Mark was like, well, I don't want things there. I want everything to be in my home T directory. I was like, well, that's a reasonable request, We do promise that, but the thing is, like, T installs gem, and then gem decides where it's putting things, right? So it's not T that's putting those things there, it's gem. So I think probably what we end up doing so far, based on all these conversations, is what it does now, but with a configuration option. And it's about time T had some configuration of some kind. I generally resist configuration for a long time because it's the cop out a lot of the time to say, okay, we'll just make it configurable. That means that you haven't really thought through the design completely to try and find the best defaults. You want defaults that 80% of people like, and then you provide a configuration option for the 20% once you've got up to that 80%. But in this case, I think 80% of people are going to want that as a default, and then they'll want to put everything in .t as a secondary configure option. And then we can do that. So then you can just delete .t, and everything that you installed via T and T itself will be removed from there. The thing is, it will be somewhat difficult to guarantee that. A lot of tools write files randomly all over your home directory. And also, we don't necessarily want all tools to do that, right? So if you use the fish shell, for example, then is it sensible for us to say that the fish configuration file should be in the .t directory? Because like, that's not standard at all, right? Like, is that what anyone really wants, even if they set that T configuration option? So I don't know. So yeah, we certainly would love more discussion on this in the thread. Mark just posted it into the Tea Time chat channel that's alongside this thing.
Yeah, I hope we get more feedback. I just saw in Tea Time text there was like Ditch Comforts that he's on the other side. I think that was the response of what Jacob had said. Ditch Comfort was also on the idea that everything should be sim-linked. I remember that was like,
That's possible. We'd have to patch things like gem to do that, which is more work for us, but we're totally willing to do it. We want, like, that's kind of half the role of a packager, really, is making sure that it fits within that paradigm. Like, what is the difference between different Linux distributions? really, or different varieties of Unix. Well, macOS is clearly very different, but all the other kinds that are mostly open source really is just packaging choices.
Mhm.
So yeah, we should patch these things to make them work in a sensible way. Maybe yeah, that's the solution, like sim linking into the local.bin. Like part of the reason I did this patch to Ruby Gems, right, is because where it was installing binaries otherwise was a very silly place. Its default was a very silly place that would be difficult for users to find. Well, admittedly, Gem does tell you when after it's installed things, but also it's specific to each version of Ruby. So that had to be changed for sure. Because every time you upgrade a Ruby, you don't necessarily want to have to like, make sure the gems are installed again. If you use gem installer, you should be using bundle install for actual work. But you know, if you're installing something with gem, you probably expect it to stay there and not be removed if T upgrades Ruby. So at the very least, I had to fix that. And while I was there, I was like, okay, yeah, well, this isn't a great place. Maybe it should be more typical, more standard. So I browsed a bunch of other package managers to see what they were doing, and then went with what seemed like the standard default. But you know, a lot of the time we make these decisions quickly because we're doing a lot of different things, and really do want everyone who's interested in what we're doing here to chime in and open tickets, and we'll talk about it. I never consider anything I choose to be the final and absolute choice, and I only veto things occasionally. I do occasionally. I think that sometimes like the presidential veto. You know, I think sometimes you have a more holistic idea and it's difficult to explain, and you just got to say no. Like that time Satoshi said, "I'm sorry, I don't have time to explain it, but you're wrong," or whatever it was.
Yeah, we generally know why we think it should be the way we think it is. And so we're always happy to like try and lay that out and then argue with you about why we still think we're right, because we might be wrong, and you know, arguing about it is the way to figure that out, right? Figuring out where the shortcomings are in our conceptualization of the outcome. And you know, when you see where it's not going to work right, you're like, yeah, that's the mistake I've made. Let's find the path that solves, you know, that connects the dots we already have in the ones that we've unearthed by you know, friendly debate. So yeah, we love that stuff. Because we'd rather have good software than be right. Being right's not that valuable at the end of the day, but good software definitely is.
Yeah, agreed. Like what we want is something that's great. And if it's not great, we'll be sad about that. I won't be sad that I was wrong. I'll be happy that we found the right solution.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's also like part of being an open source project, right? I mean, that's why it's open source, that we can have the community chime in. Otherwise, you know, we'd be building behind like I don't know, a walled garden or in a walled garden.
Yeah, that's probably why people don't do open source is a large topic. I certainly don't feel that the reason I've done so much open source is like many of the others, but I guess because you know I was thinking about Warp. Like I use Warp now that since Jacob introduced me to it, and I was late as terminal app, and they're closed source, and I don't really understand that. They should be open source. They say they want to be, but they're not.
I think
You can
their server side stuff that is holding them back. I'm sure there's some like architectural reasons that are concerning them. But yeah, like you said, they are working on a, you know, they've got a discussion open where they're trying to convince themselves to open source it. So hopefully that works for them.
yeah. Because I've had some of our investors be like, "Aren't you afraid that someone else is going to take the open source code you've released and make a competitor?" And well, no. Like they can't clone my brain and Jacob's brain and Mark's brain and all the other staff we have. Like it's the team and the community that makes the project. But yeah, like
Well,
I've worked at closed source companies.
Make another open source, fork, and we'll incorporate the stuff that's good. Or if your fork's better, we'll move to your fork. Like that's open source. Now, if you steal the code, then we have an issue. But that's there's laws to help us out there, and code thieves, especially highly public ones, code thieves, don't necessarily have the best track record.
Yeah. Well, like this is why we have trademarks on our logo. I remember Firefox had this problem where people would release, malicious versions of Firefox that would steal your bank account or things like that. I can't remember exactly what they did. And because they had trademarks over their logo, they were able to get whoever was hosting these things to take it down. Because otherwise, do you have any rights there? I don't think so. I think that's what our lawyers think.
Yeah, I mean the service marks tend to be owned, but at the end of the day, if you fork tea and call it coffee, more power to you. We'll be closely watching your development chain and reverse stealing anything that we like. So, and that's the way, honestly.
Yeah, like totally. Like if someone can fork tea and make a better version of tea than we can, then good for them. Like our investors are going to be super pissed at me, but like ultimately, I'll be super impressed and probably use it. So yeah, it's never been something that bothers me.
Yeah.
What about, because we were talking about, reading open source code, what about like AI and like, these AI auto completions, whether it's Copilot or Codex or Tab9 or whatever they called, kind of like training on open source software?
Yeah,
Code
well, I
think
have. Go on, Jake.
I was just saying, Copilot's pretty great. It really does cut down on the boilerplate, and it always makes mistakes, so it's not going to take your job. So it writes 95% of the code, and then you're like, well, that's just wrong. Let me go ahead and fix that, dumb Copilot. But it cuts way down the typing.
Yeah, well, in terms of like the open source developers that are sort of upset that it's taking their code, that seems weird to me. And because why would you open source it if you didn't? I guess some people want it to be used by people, and it sort of offends them that. But I don't know. I can't get behind that. Certainly, I love the tools. We've used Copilot a bunch. I use ChatGPT on a regular basis now because it just knows things that are hard to otherwise find. And even though there's a relatively high amount of hallucination, if you know what, you verify it first, or you tell it hallucinated, then like fixes its problem. But yeah, like the other day, I asked it how I could fix RubyGem's source code to do what I was trying to do for T, because I was struggling to find the right part of the code. And I quite like Ruby a lot, but one of the things that's bad about it is that everything could be what they call monkey patched. So any part of the source code could actually not be. You don't really know what to search for. Is the problem? So I was searching for things that functions I knew that were being called, and like not finding them. Because they don't really exist in the code. They're just like created at runtime. But it knew. ChatGPT told me exactly where to go to find the right piece of code. That was quite special.
What about
open source?
Yeah. It's nice. I've seen a lot of demos like in various developer docs that are implementing kind of like semantic search in via like whether it's a Clippy or like some kind of like bottom of the right helper tool that you just ask a like natural language question and it will get you the right section in the docs for you or tell you exactly what you need to do. And I feel like that's going to be very helpful instead of just doing a full text search on the docs.
Yeah, it really will. Like, it's an exciting time in that respect. But I don't think we'll add that to T, because if we need it, then that means that I failed to make it simple enough that you don't need to read extensive amounts of documentation to use it. But then once I'm satisfied we're there, we might add it.
Yeah, yeah. Try to keep it as simple as possible, as long as possible. That should be the goal. What about Twitter's algorithm going open source? I mean, it's been talked about like since April last year, I think, when Elon first mentioned that. And I think yesterday or so he tweeted out that it's going open source next week. Not that I'm expecting anything big from that. Probably people will be disappointed if statements maybe. But
I mean, they omit all the places you can put your thumb on the scale. I would assume the algorithm is pretty straightforward.
yeah.
But I
Yeah,
like
what a-
it, proving that it is, open and honest, like Elon claims Twitter will be.
Mhm.
I think that's good, and you can only hope that more of these Web2 companies will feel compelled to follow suit, but they probably won't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Put the really expensive version of Twitter on the blockchain where you just pay to immutably forge a tweet for all time.
Yeah. Are you guys on any of these other platforms? Or like these elephant platforms? Mastodon?
Mastodon. No, I understand that a lot of people got upset and then wanted to leave. This has happened many times in Twitter's history. And the truth is, like, you can't usurp Twitter's network effect. It's just too big. You need something that's different and better to Twitter. So I haven't bothered. But we're hopefully in talks with the Mastodon developers, because we'd love to make it so that T can just spin up a Mastodon node that's super easy on your own computer or some computer you control. That I'm passionate about.
Yes. That'd be great. That'd be really great. We've been talking a lot actually, and I didn't give any chance to the audience to ask anything yet. So it's more like not AMA, but what we ask ourselves everything, anything. Any questions from the community? Otherwise, we're also at closing in on the full hour. So been talking for a while. I see flat typing. While we wait for some answers, just a quick announcement to those who are here. If some of you happen to be in Denver next week, we'll be there at East Denver. It's like one of the biggest, if not the biggest, kind of like Ethereum meetup turned kind of like de facto crypto conference, not just in the US, but I think worldwide. It's very large. And yeah, we'll be there. And we have a meetup. I'll just post a tweet here where, yeah, we'd love to meet developers. So if you're not going, but you know someone who's going, please do forward the link to your friends. We'd love to meet excited developers. And of course, we'll be there. I know many of you are in different parts of the world and won't travel all the way to Denver. So that's why we have these nice virtual hangouts. We'll also have one from Denver next week. We'll try to come up with something fun, for our next hangout.
I was just thinking that if the Twitter algorithm gets open source, there's going to be a bunch of comedy pull requests from people like making it so that their tweets get like sent to everybody or something like that.
Do you actually think they will merge, like that the Twitter
No.
algorithm will be on GitHub and like it's the production version?
I'm sure it'll be on GitHub, and like it's possible it won't be the production version, right? It could be just a farce.
Yeah.
But that would defeat the purpose. I'm sure that they would accept pull requests, but they might have a more formal mechanism for that where, you have to do an RFC or something first, which, very sensible thing open source has adopted for big projects over the last, 5-8 years or so. But I'm sure that there'll be a bunch of comedy pull requests and it'll be fun. Tempted to do a one for T. If we could get there first, we could get some press. Scan the code
we
base,
just need to
find
look
where
at
it adds, how it determines what tweets could be pushed to everybody, and then just make it so
Yeah.
it only pushes ours.
Just rework
Yeah.
all the CI so it uses Twitter on the backside. It'd be like, hey guys, here you go. Here's your updated CI.
Yeah, that'd be cool too. Just merge in our T setup. That'd be fun. Cool. It's questions. It's not, it's also fine. I mean, I hope it's not, it wasn't boring, but I still see 20 people here. So that's great. Yeah, I think we talked about everything that I wanted to get through today. Next week, we'll have so we'll be at East Denver, but so maybe the time zone, I think, should be the same. I don't know what the time zone is now, but Magnus Furious says he's nearby and he's here. So it seems like it's sometime in the morning. It seems like a good time of the day to do an AMA or an office hour. And yeah, I'm actually thinking of maybe do some presentation and share the screen. I hung out in GitPod's office hour yesterday, and it was cool. They did like an hour long kind of like screen sharing session. So I'm thinking about doing that. Maybe package something. I'll block like 2 hours or so. Yeah.
We can just watch you slam your forehead against the camera while you try to figure out.
I mean, it can be just like 2 hours of me just rerunning the same thing over and over again, right? So, but that's also packaging.
Just
We should have a packaging speed run.
Yeah, that's true.
Rust, the fastest from he was there most recently.
The pro strat for speedrunning is package something out of crates.io.
Well, yeah, that's true. Not speedrun then. What's the thing I'm thinking of? Some sort of whatever.
You got to give everybody the same package, and then you speed run them against each other to get it built.
Who gets the CI fastest?
Yeah, maybe GNU Guile. We're gonna need it eventually, and I don't want to package it. So.
Oh man, no, nothing from GNU. GNOME and GNU, they're the worst.
Yeah, I mean, GNOME. All of their stuff is as tightly linked as GNU's is, but it's all much more heavy, just less low level, and therefore more prone to idiosyncratic behavior.
The problem is they, over the last, I don't know how long has GNOME been around, 20 years probably, they kept thinking they could reinvent auto tools and then somehow doing an even worse job. I think they've mostly said on Meson now, which is pretty good, relatively.
Except for being Python, but that's a prejudice for another time.
Well, I understand not wanting to write C. We didn't have Rust until recently. Or Go, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's a cool idea for next week. Package something together. It doesn't have to be speed packaging, obviously, but you can like set like a time block, and then whatever we won't get done in that 1 hour or 2 hours, we can take offline.
We can probably find something on the top 300 that isn't sexy enough that somebody's going to just pick it and isn't terrible enough that you might get it done in an hour, bar, the after checking.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Yeah, if there's nothing more from your end, the Windows question was just raised. Is there a roadmap or early stage preview for P on Windows? I mean, besides WSL, which does work on Windows, but yeah, I know both Max and Jacob are quiet.
Well, we're waiting for you to finish mumbling your way through the question, Mark. So let me look.
I'm trying to give you time to prepare what you're gonna say.
Well, much appreciated. Let me look at my version 1 list here. Yeah. Like what I really want to do next is look into how the Python tooling works and see what we can do to, improve that. Partly because I want to write a script that like generates avatar images for me. This one that I'm using here is all right, but it's not great. But also, I think it'd be awesome to give the AI community like a better tool than what they got. And like, there's kind of a mess of stuff out there, and I think we can help improve that. After that, the Universal Dependency Manager feature, like, I haven't figured that out yet, so I'll do Windows after that. I say, some of the work's been started, but other things became important. But I really feel that being on all three platforms as like first class is a compelling feature for us.
Mm-hmm.
We're also going to try and talk to Microsoft and see if they're interested in what we're doing there. So we're waiting to hear back from them. So I'm glad you're excited, and I promise it will be here. I can't give you a date.
Yeah, it would be foolish of us to ever take it off the roadmap, but Windows is the least Unixy of the three major operating systems, and therefore will require the most special casing, unfortunately.
Our plan is, get Tcli itself working with fake packages, and then start packaging up like all the essentials, and then we'll launch. And like, not everything will work on Windows, but then that's where people who are passionate about the idea of it working on Windows step in and help us, and we'll gradually get it up to parity.
By that point, I assume we'll need a works on or supported OS's YAML key in order to specifically track all that.
I think we just need good error messages, because like right now you can have missing bottles for Mac or Linux, and the error message is terrible. And especially because I put in the README, have good error messages. I feel bad about that. Having good error messages, we're almost to having good error messages. I just fixed another one this morning. So I think, a good error message will do the trick there. And we'll just say, hey, it doesn't work on Windows yet, but we have the pantry entry. So go to this URL, read the documentation. You can fix this. I promise you, you can fix this. It's not as hard as you think. And like BrewKit has helped bring it a step closer to being quite a lot easier. Truth is, packaging is fiddly, but most packages, like 90% of them, it's really quite simple once you understand the basics. The script is often just like run one command or two commands. Make sure you got the dependencies. You can get that from the README of the project. Find the source tarball. Test is really the hardest bit, but if you get to the point where it builds, you can do the pull request, and we'll write a test or help you. We'll help you for sure.
Right.
So, yeah. Frankly, if you just find the URL to the source tarball, that's like more work than I can usually be bothered with. If you just pull request that, there's a good chance we'll start assisting.
Would all the packages kind of like that we are packaging now for Mac and Linux work on Windows, or is this just, most of them wouldn't? Like, just guessing.
A lot will nowadays.
A lot will. I guarantee some of them will not. Like, not.
Yeah.
A lot of command line software never gets ported or never gets, fully have all the bugs shaken out on Windows, just because Windows developers are often working with Microsoft tools and not using very much of the open source ecosystem. So there's sort of less impetus to support them overall, just out in the wild in general. And it's it's complicated, right? Windows is, of course, it's a moving target. It's often been not open compiler friendly, but a lot of things, and especially things built with more modern tooling, right? That your Go's and your Rusts generally often run just fine on Windows. Your interpreted stuff, like your Python, your NPM, and your Node, rather, your JavaScript, unless it's doing some really, really low level stuff, will often run just fine. So it's a mixed bag, and it all depends on whether the upstream has taken the hit of building in the Windows support themselves.
Right.
Yeah, like Jacob says, we're not going to make something work on Windows if it doesn't work, full stop, if they don't support it. That's outside of our reign. We make packages available provided they have taken the time to make it work on Windows. But the truth is, nowadays, an awful lot of stuff works much more than it used to be the case. Microsoft are far more open source themselves, and they're far more interested. Like, they kind of realize that everyone used to develop on Windows, and then they lost that somehow. And now it's kind of not interesting to most developers and developer houses and dev shops, partly because of phones, I guess. But so they've like the Windows subsystem for Linux is an example of them trying to like fix that. And and all the major tools work on Windows. So if it works, we'll make it work.
Cue the video of Ballmer yelling developers over and over.
Yeah.
It is crazy. They used to be the platform. Like, people barely develop for anything else. So it's amazing how that can like be lost. How do you lose that?
iPhone, as you said, was almost certainly the major driver.
Yeah. Well, and the web, of course. Because the web brought in like the idea that you didn't want apps, and then the iPhone brought back the idea that actually you did want apps, but you don't want them on your computer.
Well, and just Apple's, let's call it a perverse insistence that you have to buy their hardware in order to develop for their mobile phone. It's terrible from an open source perspective, but it worked. It locked them in a substantial market share, and it really did help drive them as a de facto developer platform. Much as I hate to admit it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, indeed. We all wish Apple had more of their developer tooling open source. Well, they do have a bunch of open source. It's just like it's not any of the bits that anyone cares about. So they can claim they have a lot. Of course, Swift is open source, like the new language. But it would be nice if all of the other dev tools were, because we need the Xcode command line tools for T in order to do C compilation and things like that. And it's partly because they haven't open sourced enough of those pieces. But I'm pretty tempted to strip out the SDKs from there and bundle them ourselves, even though there's an explicit license preventing that. I want to see if they'll dare sue us. And if they do, sorry, Troy, I know you're probably panicking right now. I wonder if they would. I don't think they'd sue a tool that's trying to improve development on their platforms, and all we're doing is redistributing something that they want developers to have anyway. But strip out the SDKs, then we don't need all the other crap in there. I'd love it if, because Mac comes with Git in the user bin directory, but if you type it, it tries to install the Xcode command line. I'd love it if we could intercept that and instead have T install Git. That'd be great. I don't think it's possible because of system integrity protection, which they added a few years back.
There's an open source tool called Xcodes that allows you to install different versions of Xcode, but it requires that you provide it your credentials so it can log into Apple's developer website and download the license.
Pretty tempted to find the IPFS copies of all the Xcodes and give it to the Xcodes tool. Like iPhone dev, Mac dev is on my list of like things that T should do great, better than other things. I want all the programming languages to be super great with T. So I'm going to target Python AI tomorrow. Probably starting tomorrow because now I got sucked into some Pantry extra stuff. And that's because it's a hot new area for sure. Everyone's talking about AI all the time at the moment. But also I think it's cool. I want to be playing around with all these neat pieces of AI tooling. And if he can do anything to improve that, we will improve it. Is the simple fact. If I can do it just by tweaking how these different Python dependency managers work, I'll do it that way. But if we have to build an entirely new tool to fix that, I think we'll do that. It's worth it for this area. Like the attention we'll get from the AI community. So I'm going to be doing some heavy research on that soon. Yeah, I want to target everything. Make Xcode dev better and Ruby dev better and Node and everything I can, basically.
Oh, speaking of Swift, by the way, if anybody out there is excited to package up swift.org, I took a look at their build scripts and it's just awful. So you're more than welcome to have at it.
Yeah. I looked at it as well. Pretty hairy for sure. But I'd love to have, the different versions of Swift easily available, because otherwise there's a lot of people installing different versions of Swift in CI. It's kind of a pain. So if we could do a better job, and we just have to package them. Yeah, like Apple stuff always seems to be a pain to package. Because they don't care if anyone else can do it.
Right.
They only
Like,
care if like their internal teams that do packaging can do it.
yeah, just download the PKG and go about your day. Don't worry about how to do it.
Mhm. Well, I think we're done unless anyone has any more
Yeah.
questions.
No, I think that was a great session. Great hour and 13 minutes.
Hopefully the recording worked this time for those who can make all of
I'm
it.
very optimistic, but we'll see. Not sure yet where I should share this afterwards. Whether, I don't know, the
Maybe
best would be through
Maybe it's time we started a
YouTube.
YouTube channel. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we have one with a couple of videos on there, and there will be more. There are some videos in progress, but yeah, this might be a good session. I know that there are others
We
that
have a YouTube channel.
we have one, yeah.
I guess I should know that.
Yeah,
there you go.
like Jitsi, they use. I think they also record in Discord or on YouTube or something. Their like weekly developer meetings and push them up there. Quite nice.
Okay. Do me a
Yeah.
favor though, Mark, and get the logo redone. It has white pixels on the left and the right.
Right. Yes, I will. I don't know who uploaded that. All right.
Someone without attention to detail.
Yeah. That's true. Okay. Cool. Well, it's actually gotten more people. I don't know. Maybe this time of the day is better. Interesting. Or because we were speaking for so long that attracted more people. But in any case, we have a recording. I'll share that recording with everyone in case they want to listen to us rambling on about different stuff. But it was actually very interesting to hear about BlueKit, to kind of like the RFC, T command, Windows, different types of packaging. Next week, live from, I mean, we're always live, but live from Denver with a packaging session. I'm committed to that. So I hope some of you will show with your laptops, not with your phones. And yeah, thanks so much, Max and Jacob, and everyone here. Have a great rest of the day, morning, or evening. I'll just mute and then stop the recording.